Really kind of my first question. You guys want to just say out loud what your Instagram handles are?
If he can find it, I'll tell you.
I can't find it. Mine is Tokutake
How
Bonsai.
would I do that?
Tokutake Bonsai.
Mine, April Grigsby Ceramics on Instagram and also Facebook.
Mine is @Waldo_street_pottery for Instagram, and that ties into Facebook as well.
Okay.
And I deeply regret my pottery handle because, like, when I made it, it was actually for bonsai. It's like I was gonna use it for like
For
my
trees.
personal trees and junk,
What happened?
and then I started posting pictures of pots, and I became a potter.
Tell me about that. Like,
Funny how that happens.
how did you like pick it up? Like, what drew you to starting with ceramics?
Well, my wife was a potter. She still is a potter. And we were dating in grad school, and she said, "Take a pottery class." And then I got hooked immediately. But it was community college. So my formal training was a single community college class.
Really?
Yeah, that's it.
What was the? Hi, welcome.
Hello.
What was the class on? Was it just general
Like hand building.
hand building?
Yeah, this was West Los Angeles Community College. It was like $28,
Oh heck yeah!
and it was like Wednesday nights, and that was it.
How long ago was that?
12 years ago. Yeah.
And
I think like the next month I bought a wheel on Craigslist.
really?
And so we set up a pottery wheel in her parents' house in Los Angeles. So I was throwing, learned to throw. She taught me to throw in her parents' house in Los Angeles.
What is your wife's name?
She does all the painted pots that I do.
Oh really?
Yeah, Myrick. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Sounds
She
good.
does. I didn't know that.
Huh?
I didn't know she did all those.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the cutest pots in the world.
Right.
They're like amazing.
She's an animator, so
Yeah.
like she's really good at cutesy, artsy stuff.
Yeah.
So.
What about you guys, the others of you? How did you guys start your training or start your journey?
Could you click introduce me a few people?
Well, can you guys reintroduce yourselves? Sorry. Yeah, everybody just got here. I goes like, hey, we'll just start talking now. So
I have no conception of time anymore.
you're still on time.
I am.
So it's great, yeah.
It's great.
April Grigsby Ceramics.
Now from Tokutake Bonsai.
Byron from Myrick Bonsai Pottery.
Akins, Waldo Street Pottery, Atlanta, Georgia.
So now told us some of his beginnings in bonsai ceramics, and anybody else want to kind of have an interesting training or?
I'll tell you what, I tried ceramics in high school, went completely over my head. Tried to get in college, and once again over my head. Then I got into bonsai, and my teacher has an extensive collection of pots. It's pretty amazing, and I got inspired by that. And then I have a cousin also who's a potter, and saw her studio, and that got me also inspired to try to make bonsai pots specifically.
Who was your teacher?
Rodney Clemens is my bonsai teacher. And then learning ceramics, I took a couple of wheel classes and then joined a community studio. Taught myself the rest until I hooked up with Ron Lang and got to go study with him a few times and made that relationship and learned a whole bunch of good stuff.
So, just like bonsai, you guys are normally doing this as a very private thing. It's not really a group effort to do pottery. What's it like for you guys when you get together? Is it inspiring to see what each other do? Or
Absolutely.
You learn something new? What about you now?
No, yeah, absolutely. Like dinner last night, we were just deconstructing how Ron makes his pots. That was
Yeah.
a fun discussion.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What'd you learn?
The order of operations, like the floor to the walls was new to me. And
Right.
what kind of jigs he uses to set the angles just right. All
Cool.
these things.
Do you make them yourself? The jigs that you use?
I have Ron's. Yeah.
Really?
When he re-retired, I ended up with the bulk of his.
Why are your pots still crooked?
Because I'm crooked, what do you think? My pots are flawed just like me.
I feel like no matter how much time I try putting into making a wall straight,
Yeah,
there's always a little wobble in there.
there's no doubt.
When you fire it, it relieves stress. And,
Yeah. Yeah, it goes in straight, it comes out.
Memory.
Why doesn't clay remember the good stuff?
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. it wants to go back to.
Seldom does it remember the good stuff.
Right.
It's therapy.
What do you mean by that, guys?
Well, as it fires, it will move, and if you put a little bend in it and straighten it back out, it remembers that you bent
Oh,
it, and
okay.
it'll go back.
Yeah.
So you don't do it like perfectly right the first time, you're saying? Then
Or
it's
if
like,
you've put a little too much stress on something.
Yeah.
And you straighten it out, it's gonna say, nope, I remember where I was before.
oh,
Yeah, and you can overcompensate, but sometimes it goes the other direction.
Right.
Like a cowlick in your hair.
Pardon me?
Like a cowlick in your hair. You can never,
Kind
it
of.
always just goes
Yeah,
back there.
Kind
Right.
of, yeah. Yeah. My experience with clay was pretty traditional. I mean, I started out taking art classes, and my first class was with ceramics when I was about 5. And then my parents, they were very supportive, so I got to take art classes throughout my childhood. And a little bit of pottery when I was in high school. But mostly when I got to college, I went to art school and started taking ceramics classes right away, and ended up being a ceramics major. And
Where was that?
It was at the Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio.
so where's the tree part come into your story?
Well, the tree part is that I was also interested in bonsai from the time of, my preteen age. So, and my first experience really with seeing bonsai was at the Dawes Arboretum in Newark, Ohio, which is central Ohio also. So that just stuck with me. And my first class that I took was in Chicago with Ivan Waters. And then that just kind of led to staying with bonsai until I moved to Florida with tropical bonsai, and I was the president of a club for a couple of years and did their newsletter and all of
Bless
that.
you, yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of work.
yep, it is.
Yeah, I was an art major as well, and had to take some elective classes, and pottery was one of them. And first time I touched it, more or less, but from that moment on, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I was a painting major at that time, and finished up as a pottery major.
Can you set the stage, like what year is this, and like, what was it?
Man,
Sorry.
you get real personal.
That's 2005, right?
Yeah, year before that. No, this was early 70s.
Okay.
So,
Fun time to be in college, for sure.
yeah.
And where did you,
Well,
where
it
were
was a
you?
dangerous time to be in college.
Where were you?
I was in
Yeah.
school
Went
at
to
Southern
LSD.
Hills, University of South Mississippi.
So at that time, was it cool to be a potter, or was it like?
Well, it was kind of a resurgence of the crafts during that time, and so yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I taught for 30 years in a community college, taught pottery, and so met my wife, and she'd grown up in California and lived there most of her life, and her folks were from South Mississippi, and they had moved out there at an early age. They moved back. She came back to help her father, who was ill, and we met, and married. So we went back to visit some of her friends, and I'd had an interest in bonsai, but never really. I say South Mississippi's kind of a bonsai desert. There's not much there. New Orleans has an active club in Baton Rouge, but 2 or 3 hours away, but nothing near me. But anyway, go into a friend's house and go out on the patio, and there's some bonsai trees. I'm like, wow. And it turns out that his mother had been a bonsai artist and had passed away. He had inherited them, so to speak. And sadly, a year later, they were all dead. But that spurred my interest. And so, natural thing to do was for me to make my own pots. And so that turns into business now.
The best thing about what you guys do is even when the tree dies, the pot survives.
Yeah,
They'll live another
For
life.
thousands of years.
I always say you don't have to water them or feed them.
Right.
Or weed them.
That's right.
My problem is that my potting season is my repotting season.
Yeah.
So
A lot
my
of
trees
conflict.
don't usually get repotted because I'm making pots.
Yeah, that's the bad thing about being a potter and trying to do bonsai. When you're really busy, it's when they need the attention.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're trying to get last minute
Ready for a show.
stuff, yeah, shows and last minute orders out and so forth.
I find it's very ergonomic though to find a balance between getting off the wheel and going and repotting a tree and then coming back to it. You know what I mean? Just to get up, stretch your body out, do something different, get your brain out of the pot for a second, get into repotting and then come back to it. It helps me out.
Yeah, that's great that you can focus and refocus.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm very envious of that. I mean,
Yeah,
one track
it
mind
is.
and then I'm
Yeah,
like
once
squirreling
I
that
get
over.
going, it's like, I can't.
Yeah, it does take longer than you think it's going to, but you know, if you're gonna get it right, you gotta try.
Right, yeah.
But balance, everything's about balance for me. I try to be balanced as
That's
balanced as I
crazy,
can.
why?
Usually not, but I can try.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there's an overlap of the bonsai potting season and the pottery season. Is that a production, just when you need to be producing, or does that have something to do with like when materials?
No, it has to do with just getting ready for the beginning of the show season.
Oh,
You know, like for me, well, in my climate, I should be repotting when I'm starting to glaze and fire and get ready to have everything together for the show.
Right.
And you know, you're constantly, like it's about organizing your time and getting it, you do get into a rhythm. And I feel like even, you know, I've been back to making bonsai pots since about 2017, 18, and I'm still finding a rhythm. But maybe I'm just a slow learner. Yeah, but it takes time. You know, there was a book, I think it was called Finding Your Way with Clay.
I love that book.
Yeah, I need to go back and read it.
What's it about?
It's about
Simple.
a ceramicist from I think the 60s maybe,
Probably,
who
yeah.
was a gay man but maybe wasn't publicly, and so he lived with some assistants who he called his fairies, and he made incredible clay pieces, like sculptural vases and things like this, out in the desert in mostly solitude, and wrote a book on his techniques, and I wish that I could remember his name at the moment.
Yeah, let's
But
look it
yeah.
up, Finding Your Way with Clay.
Finding Your Way with Clay.
Yeah.
And just the way he describes his process is just so artful and whimsical and inspirational to, like, you know, someone like me who's only been doing it a few years.
Yeah.
All is for
Yeah, that's it.
burn salt.
Yeah. And I think there's a documentary as well.
So how do you find your inspiration for the types of pots that you make? I mean, do you go online and look and see what other people are doing? Or do you experiment or
I'm curious
what
now.
customers ask for?
I'm completely live in the past. I look at ancient Chinese pots and Japanese pots, and I go to shows in Japan. I've been going to shows in Japan since I was 5.
We're all envious of
Oh.
Nao because he grew up in
And
Japan.
it's a 10-hour flight from Portland.
Yeah.
Come on now, like you just get on a plane. Anyone can go to Japan. It's not a mythical place.
But you also speak the language.
Yeah, well,
That helps.
but you go to the kokofu, you can touch the pots, you can see the pots. These are really nice, famous pots. Kunio Kobayashi has a really great collection, so I've spent a lot of time on my hands and knees in his kind of attic area, like holding real old pots. And I think that's the only way to really,
Oh, absolutely, touch and
The
feel.
museum, yes, he's got really nice
yeah.
pots and
So
stands
you get inspiration.
and
like-
samurai swords.
Sure.
Or
Samurai
you-
swords. You know, like how did they make the feet back then, and how did they do the rim, and what kind of clay did they use? And I don't want to just make a straight copy of a pot, but you know, a modern interpretation of it or something.
How do you spin that? How do you make something old feel
Yeah.
or look modern?
Yeah, everything in
Is that
the
the
universe,
secret?
the answer is balance.
Right.
Because like I think in America today, Americans want cool pots. We want crystals and bright colors and crazy ass angles and stuff.
It does seem that way.
But those don't make good bonsai pots, right? But on the other hand, a traditional bonsai pot is really useful, but it's kind of boring, you know, like this looks just like a Chinese pot, you know? Who wants to pay $300 for a Chinese pot? So there's balance, you know, like it needs to look cool, but also be functional, you know, something that is useful. I don't want my pots to be on a shelf, it should actually have a tree in it.
Right.
So.
It's designed to be worn.
Right. So the glazer shouldn't like scream at you, it should actually work with the tree.
It's like matting a picture or framing a picture. You don't frame a picture painting so that it's more important than the artwork.
So you go to the kokufu, you look at the tree and the pot, and you kind of understand why that glaze is correct. And there you determine that a lot of the crap you see on Facebook today is not correct. Like there's no way that blue ass glaze will look good in that tree, right? Or the yellow, or whatever, you know. So
Right.
Sorry for cussing.
So
Very passionate.
we can edit these things out later.
Speaking of glazes, I heard you take a pretty methodical approach to figuring out or trying to reverse engineer some of the older glaze chemistry. Do you act, or when you're going to reproduce, do you do anything to actually like do any type of chemical analysis of what old glazes were to be able to reverse engineer it, or is it more of just mixing modern components and testing until you get something that visually resembles?
I think potters can hold something and know what it's made of.
Okay.
Like we just know a glaze, we can kind of reverse engineer it, and then it's just trial and error. I do like hundreds of test tiles to copy a koyo glaze or a tofukuji glaze. Eventually you get it right. But also going to Japan, I don't steal recipes, but I go to Gyozan's workshop and I see what kind of materials he's stocking. You know, I've been at a clay co-op in Tokunabe, and I see the kinds of clays that they're blending. So and I take that back and I kind of reproduce the things that they're doing. So.
Speaking of that, you each have different clay bodies from one another. Could you speak a little bit about your clay body, why you like working with that particular one in your practice? Byron?
Well,
I thought yours was really neat.
Yeah.
Well, it's a formula that I ran across, I don't really remember where, but probably back in my college days.
So you've been using it for a really long time?
Yeah.
Why are you using cone 6 or cone 10?
10, yeah. Now, my kiln, speak on that, a gas kiln, but I built a kiln, and so it fires kind of uneven a little bit, so it has some hotter spots and cooler spots in it. So I'll get an 8 to 10 range, which is about 50 degrees difference, I guess, in ballpark variant. So if you look at some of my glazes and the clay body, you'll see a little variance in temperature or color, and that's that temperature. I don't try to mix the clay. I don't have a lot of room for the storage of bags of clay and so forth. Just keeping chemicals to mix glazes is enough. So there's a clay company a couple hours away from me, Southern Pottery. They're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and so I get them to mix. I order a couple of tons at a time, and they'll mix it. And I also have.
It's a weighty business.
Yeah.
My studio is in the basement. My husband makes stands on one side of the basement, and I throw clay on the other side.
Oh, the tools for those two things are like, they want the opposite environment, right? Like wood tools want everything dry.
Yeah, we finally put up a wall, so the noise was a little bit less, and the dust and infiltrate.
Of course, wood's dusty and clay's dusty, but you don't want that clay dust on that wood.
Yeah. But I've got bad knees, so my husband gets to carry, thousands of pounds of clay down in the basement. We've talked about, well, do we need an elevator or some kind of a ramp or something like
Funny how it
that.
hurts worse when the clay arrives.
What's
Funny
that?
how your knee hurts worse when the clay arrives.
Yeah, or the kiln is upstairs, so the pots have to go upstairs, so and back downstairs for glazing, so it's less than ideal. So, you think about the labor that's involved. There are aspects besides just making the pot, firing the pot, glazing the pot, firing the pot. And I mean, if you have an upstairs studio, one level, that's nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Do all of you guys use gas kilns?
I use electric,
Electric?
and I have a digital controller, so I'm able to program it, and the kiln fires just what I want it to do, which is very nice.
Abyss fire, I think probably about all of us, Abyss fire, no, you Abyss fire gas, Abyss fire electric.
I'm electric, but I'm 2 steps away from having Ron Lang's gas kiln online, so.
I
Excited
bought
for that.
Dale Cochoy's updraft gas kiln, but I was really struggling to fire it, so I decided to.
Those things
that's-
fire screwy anyway.
Oh, yeah, it's hard, and I was having to use it as a bisque kiln too, and I was losing pots and bisque.
Is there a reason you never see wood-fired or raku pots? Is it just the time?
Raku's gonna fire high enough to be porous.
Too
And
fragile.
then it'll break,
Yeah.
real fragile. You do see, I do occasionally get in, I have a friend that has a wood kiln that fires it every once in a while. And I'll put pots in it. I don't have any with me or any that I fired in the last year or so, but I enjoy firing some of the bonsai pots and
I mean, talk about the kiln doing its own thing,
Yeah.
wood
Right.
firing and
Yeah.
soda
Cool.
firing,
Yeah, I feel like that would be, it's like
Special.
a nice blend of like the natural,
yeah.
It's,
right back to the tree.
it's kind of like raku, and raku's kind of, you never know exactly what you're gonna get. I mean, you can, but.
Have you done wood firing or soda firing?
Never, but I was just thinking about why I wouldn't, and I don't think that it's the right solution for America right now, because I think what America needs is like volume and affordable and accessible pots, and wood firing is very expensive. If you wood fire a pot, it makes the pot double the price, right? So it's cool, but you don't want to pay $800 for a round. But that's what it would cost to do a wood fired.
Why does it double the price?
Wood is very expensive and it's a very long process to fire a wood kiln.
Yeah.
Days,
Yeah, so like you can't do a production run of it. Like I couldn't make 200 pots that are wood fired unless I had a huge.
Yeah, it's like you got a friend.
It's very variable, and you'll lose a good many
Yeah.
pieces
Yeah.
in a wood kiln. You get some great effects,
Yeah.
and then you can't repeat them.
What kind of wood do you use in a wood kiln?
Use any wood.
Yeah.
Any wood?
Pallet wood,
What
pine.
kind of
hottest wood.
Hardwoods probably are
I
best.
have a Ron Lang pot, an old one that has a nail stuck in the bottom of the inside because they were firing with pallets.
Somebody bought a pot at my booth and paid me.
Congratulations.
Has your guys' business been made easier by the advent of these, like, just boop,
That's
scan
been-
code and
That's nice.
it's so much
Yeah.
easier?
I don't think Uncle Sam's happy with it.
Yeah, right.
But they're doing their best to get on it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the affordability aspect of, okay, America needs more affordable pots, and from a demand side, obviously, a numbers game, price, number of pots gets you your revenue. How do you balance that from your creative side of, versus, a more popularized pot versus more of what you think is unique or creative from an artistic standpoint of being a potter?
Well, I mean, my pots are probably pretty expensive now, and I put a lot of time into them, so I struggled with pricing, but I found that it's, I'm making pots that I want to make, and they take a long time, and so I struggle when it comes to pricing pots for every show. I'm thinking,
What the market
is
will
this,
bear.
am I gonna sell? But I feel like the time that I put into it, if I price them lower, I'm not able to make ends meet. And things just keep getting more and more expensive. I mean, clay is not the most expensive part of the business, but it's gotten very expensive.
Yeah.
And then if you get, 1,000 or 2,000 pounds, you get freight on top of that and everything. But, yeah, it's a challenge to figure out pricing, and I've figured out a system where at least I catalog everything and I have a multiplier that I try to stay consistent from show to show. And that really helps a lot, because I forget, and like I said, the first day I start pricing, I write it in pencil, because then I go back and I go, wait a minute, I don't know if that's the, I usually vary my prices, but then I go back and I look, well, what did I charge last show? And that helps me keep consistent, because I don't wanna be all over the place. I wanna make a pot that's consistently priced as close to being the same as I've done before.
But you prioritize your quality and the artistic nature
Yeah.
of the pots for you personally.
Yes, yeah. I've gotten to the point where I can't make a fast pot anymore. It's just not my nature. So I can spend a day or two on a single pot, which probably to some people sounds ridiculously.
It's ridiculous.
How about the rest of you guys? For the life of a pot in the building phase, what do you guys do? Looking maybe a day or two
It
for some of the
depends.
longer
Like
ones?
especially when I'm experimenting with a new shape, I can spend a lot of time, and then I learn, and then I know that I can reproduce that pot much more quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm working out the bugs, but you work differently.
Yeah, I have a parallel process, so I'll be working on like 8 to 12 pots at the same time. So throughout the day, I'll be working on those 8 to 12 pots in parallel
And
So like it's like a batching kind
of the
thing.
same pot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I can do use the same jig, so it's more efficient that way.
Do you feel like by the last one you make in the day, you're feeling it so much better?
Yeah. So like a 12-inch oval, I've probably made 400 of those by now. You know,
Oh
like
my
it's
God.
very common, so it's like I can just knock it out and it's perfect. You know, it's very yeah. But if you're doing something brand new, then yeah, you'll spend all day on new
Yeah.
shape and
Yeah, and then I always like to try something new, but if I'm getting ready for a show and then I get this notion I'm gonna do this, I kind of regret it because I've spent 2 or 3 days, doing something like I lost all this production time. But then, there's no regrets because now I've got something that I've done and I can do it again. So that, for me, that's the creative process. Learning new shapes, but then it's very comforting to go back and revisit that shape because now I know it. And I work with crazy, but I work with several different clay bodies. And so each time I shift a clay body, it's like, hello, old friend, I feel it. You can tell it's a different clay, it reacts differently.
How many bodies do you use?
I'm embarrassed to say. 5. I just can't land on one because I like the way each clay body reacts with the glazes, the way it works, all of that.
I tend to work in a series, kind of like you, I guess, maybe size. Like I'm gonna make some 12-inch ovals, and so it's about space as well. Because they have to dry, you have to have space for them to dry and work on at the same time. So I may, throw those in the morning, and then that afternoon work on something out through the day before. And then next day kind of repeat that process, so.
Yeah, it's a juggling process.
Yeah.
And it changes in the seasons too.
Yeah. And it's all, the bigger you get, the slower it has to dry. So you may have a, 20 or 24-inch pot that has to sit there for a month drying, taking up space that, several 12-inch pots could take up and be done in a week, So, it's all about that.
Do you have an area where you slow dry pots? Are you able to push them through pretty quickly?
Yeah, my clay is very porous, but it vents water pretty quickly. But like somebody it was over the winter, someone wanted a rush custom job. He needed a pot in 2 weeks, which is crazy, right?
Tim Hudson?
Tim Hudson, I'm waiting for that to happen. So. It was Jeremiah Lee in California, but he's like, I got this tree and I need a pot in 2 weeks. So like, okay, I'll charge you a rush fee. And, so I set up all these heaters in my pottery room and I put a fan on and I got this thing to dry in like 2 days.
No cracks.
That's for getting clay.
Right, yeah. And it was a big pot too. And then, throw it in the kiln and then that next weekend fire it again. And it's,
That's crazy.
these are weird things,
I had a big pot. For me, it was a big pot. And I thought, I'm just gonna let it dry uncovered. Big crack in the bottom. I mean, I have good success. I don't lose very many pots at all, but then I had like a run of, what the heck, and I realized I was
What's
just.
going on?
I hate
Yeah.
those. I don't feel like I'm doing anything differently, but.
So
But
what's
I
the,
knew it was.
what's the custom pot process? I mean, do customers come to you with like wild designs, or do they come with the tree, or do they come and just have like a size or a color that they want, or?
I get some of that, you know, a lot of times it's just, you know, I want an oval that's this size or whatever, but I'll get those that like, I want it this big and this side, I want it to, a cutout on it or something. I've got this cascade that really sharply bent, and this side needs to be, you know.
So when they do that though, do they bring you like pictures of the tree, or tell you how much the cutout has to be?
Yeah, well, if they don't, I start asking.
Definitely helps.
And then I do a sketch or whatever and
Yeah.
see if we can get on.
And determine the shrinkage.
Yeah.
And clay, you can think that you've got that all figured out, but it shrinks differently. I can never get a pot to be exactly the size
Yeah,
that I.
yeah. It's hard to
Even though I
get.
think I've figured it out.
Yeah.
And the batches of clay that we get commercially, I think
They vary.
raw materials
Yeah.
change, and unless you're testing and firing it at the exact same temperature, that clay is gonna shrink.
Oh, I know mine does, even though I'm asking them to do it this way with these chemicals and these proportions. I know that, you know, the guy in the back's probably making $5 an hour, and he's like, I don't have another bag of that, I'm gonna have to go across the warehouse to get it, I'm not gonna do it. And it doesn't get in there.
And nowadays, it seems it's happening more and more frequently, mines are closing down.
Yeah.
And then you've gotta change, you change your formula, or, you know, figure out what's a good replacement.
Talc is the problem right now.
EPK, Grigsby borate.
Yeah.
Custer feldspar is no longer.
Yeah, these are all things we know really well.
It disappears.
Use them a lot.
They just close the mine and I can't get that anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's.
And you
could be
kinda
a-
take a big gulp, like, crap.
Yeah,
So
You gotta
I
just-
stockpile materials, I think we all do.
yeah.
I probably have like 200 pounds of Grigsby borate, and it's like, just.
Or something that for a long time was, you know, I'm
I'm not gonna
kind
sell it to you.
of the senior member here, so I can remember where, you know, starting in lithium carbonate was, nothing, you know.
$2 a pound.
Well, it's used in all the batteries now, so now it's $400 a pound.
Cobalt.
Cobalt oxide,
Right.
yeah, cobalt carbonate, yeah. It was dirt cheap, now it's.
So when I go to Japan, I see that they use mostly natural materials for their glazes. They don't use these refined crap. It's clay and ashes, and like, you know, ironstone that they ground. It's like 3 things. So like my goal is to get off the refined modern materials and get
Off the
back
drugs.
back to the original way things work. So
But you
all
still
my-
gotta have those, that cobalt and the copper.
Yeah, but all my glazes are ash glazes, so it's like mostly ash, so I don't have to rely on copper or talc.
Are you burning the wood yourself and collecting that?
My neighbor fires his wood fireplace all winter.
Awesome.
I have a bucket on my driveway that says ash on it, and all the neighbors drop their ash in there. It's like, I give them a mug, you know, every year. I give them a coffee.
Yes. So how, I'm naive, if you're, ain't all ash the same, how do you get different colors and different textures from?
Testing, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're using pine or like random hardwoods, and it all gets mixed up in my bag. And ash is mostly the same, you know. It's
Okay.
not,
It's not-
there's differences, but
Not a lot.
subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I make these giant vats of glaze that last me a couple of years.
Oh, okay,
So it's
yeah.
pretty stable during that time. Yeah.
What do you guys, proportion of what you make is commission work versus stuff that you're making and selling after it's made?
Very little for me. Commissions take all the feeling away and put the thinking in, and that's not really that much fun for me.
Yeah.
And
I'm
again,
not
you
a
can
huge
get it
fan.
within those little centimeters, and then you're off, and the customer's not satisfied, so
Yeah.
it's kind of disheartening. You make 3 or 4 of them to try and get it right, and maybe you do on one, and maybe you don't. So I don't enjoy commissions. I take them, I try them, but I don't always, I'm gonna get it.
I'll take all I can get.
So Byron, what portion do you end up doing that are commissions though?
I don't know, maybe 15-20% maybe, of what I produce,
Yeah.
Maybe not that high, but I'm not a very good record keeper when it comes to things like that, so. I do one, and if it's something that's kind of odd and different and out of the norm a little bit, I normally I'll make 2 or 3 of them and hope that one of those works. And it usually does, for me, anyway.
So when you get a commission and you're working with a form, you've got to start with that form, making a special form first.
No, a lot of my commissions, I don't use forms, they're just like one-offs, right? Like, I'll do every year I do a pro bono thing for the Pacific Bonsai Museum. I do that every year, so that's like a good example of a commission that I'll do, like, you know, some custom stuff for them, and I enjoy that. I only do commissions when I want to do it. Yeah.
What's the thing you do for the Pacific Bonsai Museum?
I'll make them a pot every year,
Okay.
and it goes on display in their museum for free, you know.
Nice.
It's good for both of us.
Yeah.
So what kind of pot was it this year?
That was the pelican pot for the bald cypress, the bond banting, bald cypress. So I go out there and we look at the tree and talk about what would be a good pot, and then I go and make it.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, these days I only do commissions if I want to do it. Because most people just want like a 16-inch oval. It's like, why are you asking me? Go ask Sarah Rayner.
Or me.
I want to do something that's unique and fun and
Yeah.
yeah. So.
Well, when you guys are out looking at pottery or bonsai pots, what differences are there between what you make and what you'd like to collect? What you're drawn to put in your own collection?
Cha-ching.
No,
I'm
that's probably my wife, you know.
a traditional person, you know, that's my inspiration. But I don't have the ability to collect pots, you know. I have a hard enough time repotting trees. But I do collect images, you know. I've got a lot of pots on my Pinterest page that I'll just kind of scroll through and look at the details and get inspiration that way, you know. So I would say I'm an image collector, not a pot collector. But I had a great opportunity to, after the national show, went upstairs to Bill Ennis's barn. He took me up there, and like stacks and stacks of old pots, and he was handing them to me, and I was touching them and feeling, you know, how they were made, and so that was a pretty special opportunity. I'd love to go to Japan one of these days.
I only collect pots from those that I know or those that I learned from. That's how I try to do it. That keeps my numbers sort of down, as opposed to just buying everything you see that you like, you know what I mean? I like that. I like to have a story behind where they come from. You know, somebody that taught me something, or people that are my friends who also make.
Yeah, well, that's like the most important. If you're gonna collect, you're gonna collect your friends' work.
Yeah, I don't have a big collection at all. I mean, I have a few that I've run across, and you know, for whatever reason, I was inspired by them and I could afford them, but not many.
Or those that inspired me. My first inspiration was Max Braverman pots, if you know those. And I was collecting everyone I could see, and now I just can't do that anymore. If I find them, he did a lot of molds, and I don't collect those anymore. I collect the ones that are handmade, signed with his name. Some of them are just stamped, and I don't really buy the stamped ones anymore. If it's not signed, I'm not going to collect it.
Speaking of signing, what would determine if you want to sign a pot or not? Because I know in Japan, they only sign their favorites, the ones they handmade. You guys have a similar process to that?
Only if it's big enough. If it's small, I just put my chop. If it's big enough, because I want my signature to bloom across the bottom of an oval, it can't bloom like that, then I don't sign it. It's too small.
Byron,
That's on most everything. I have a little stamp that's just a replica of my signature that I'll put on a smaller thing where I can't really.
you have such a beautiful signature though.
It is.
It is a nice.
So it's perfect for you.
But, yeah, I sign most of it. Occasionally I'll forget one. Slips by.
Pull it out of the
Just
place,
have
fire
maybe
with the
one of
bottom.
those
Or
when you forget to
in the
put the
rare
drain
case, you
hole,
put
the
wire
wire tie
holes
holes or
in.
forget to sign it or something. That tells me I'm tired.
Yeah, I made a big pot for a guy a few years ago, and I never noticed that. Put the drain holes in it, but I didn't put any wire holes in it. And fired it, delivered it to him, and we were gonna meet up at a club event over in Baton Rouge. Anyway, he liked it, took it off, paid me, and somebody else standing there said, I didn't have any drain holes, and he didn't want, any wire holes, he didn't want any, and I'm like, what? I didn't even realize it, you know? You do it so often, you just kinda think you've done it, you know?
Yeah, one of my last pots before this three show run I did was a really big squared circle like I do, and it was one of the best ones I've made. It came out of the kiln a second because I had two little kiln cracks by two of the drain holes, and I gave it to Russell. Of course, they go to Russell or Rodney when I make a second, and he got it and flipped it. There's no name on it, no chop, no nothing. That's totally spaced it. I was getting really tired.
Do you, I'm sure you have some seconds, every potter does.
Oh, yeah, I have a.
What do you do with it?
I'm in Portland, and there's a lot of professionals, and they all eagerly eat up all my pots.
So you give them away, or
Yeah.
you sell them at a reduced price?
Depends, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something I struggle with, about if it's got a little crack or something, do you know,
Yeah, do
take
you
a
sell
hammer
it as a
to it?
second,
Do
or-
you try to sell it
or
at a
keep
reduced
it, put
price?
your own trees
That, I
in
think
it?
the pros understand that a crack, it doesn't actually matter.
Right.
Because most of the really nice Japanese pots have random cracks in them. So it's like the modern consumer, there's a little issue, can you knock off $5? And it's like, you know, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So the pros don't care, they're like, they don't even look at it, they're like, oh, I'll take it, yeah.
Right.
That was one of the big turning points for me, was actually handling old pots, like you were saying, and getting to see kind of what they, not only how did they do it, but what did they let go? You know, because I struggle with trying to make everything pristine.
Right.
Wiping away every groove, smoothing every surface, and end up really overdoing it, taking so much longer on every pot.
Yep, I've said for a long time, the ridiculous pursuit for perfection has got to stop.
Yeah, you look at some of them online, and it's like, that is just inhumanly precise.
Right.
How can anybody achieve this? You know, you got it, and the precision is perfect.
Some pots should be precise and others shouldn't. You know, the reason people like Gyozan's pots in Japan is they start as a precise April-looking pot, and then the way he fires it, it melts and softens, and it's that combination of like precision with softness that makes Gyozan pots popular. So, no, I don't think precision is
Even,
right.
even with the precision that is the way I work, I could get too precise. I still like to leave something that says, I'm a handmade pot, I wasn't, you know, slip
Only the
cast.
creator is perfect.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, only the creator is perfect.
yeah.
So,
No, so you wanna leave your mark, you wanna leave your hand on it. And that's hard for somebody, I think, who's beginning with ceramics, is they tend to, they're wiping.
But
Well,
those
it
early pots of
shows.
those ceramics,
You're wiping
they're
that,
awesome.
that hand away, yeah.
Right.
so there's a lot of beautiful, sorry.
If you have Braverman pots, if any of you have Max Braverman pots, typically if they're the good handmade ones, you pick it up and you feel the guy's hands in the work. And that's what inspired me the most to get started.
There's a lot of nice trees in the show, but I want to know, what are you guys' favorite pots that you saw in the show?
There's a really nice antique Canton that I like, the dark green one. That's a deep rectangle. That's my favorite pot in the show.
Right.
The one right in the entrance?
Yeah. The
Not
one that won the.
not the shallow one that the hornbeam is in, but the one down the row. I forget what tree's in it, but that's a good pot.
The Koyo with the quince is my favorite tree in the show, and the Koyo pots are awesome. But I'm more inspired by the Western putters than the Eastern. I attribute that back to same thing with my music. I like the Rolling Stones long before I like Muddy Waters, so I gotta work my way backwards, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I like that Koyo pot and that quince very much.
I can't say that I have.
Don't you have a pot to show or two?
The ginkgo. I had to ask like 10 people, whose pot is that? And I figured out it was Byron's. So it's like, yeah, that works very well for me.
But that would be strange if they said that.
I haven't had a chance to really look at this show very much, so.
I don't know a lot, and I'll just confess it. What makes a good antique pot? I don't have that knowledge.
I think potters are like second-class citizens in the bonsai community, but going down the show, I was reminded how important a good pot is, because there's like 5 trees that are let down by the pot.
Yeah.
A terrible pot, good tree. I can think of like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
I'm being mean.
Without being specific, tell us what do you see that is like such a bad.
There's a maple in a really cheap Chinese pot in there. Like it's like shiny and it's brand new and its glaze is terrible. It looks like it came from IKEA. And it's like, you know, if you just spend $200 on a nice pot, the tree's worth $2,000 and you got like a $50 pot. It's like, what are you doing, you know? Sorry, I'm just...
There's something else I see out there I think are out of proportion. And it's not that I know that much about the pot that is there, but the tree and the pot don't work together, you know, in my opinion. Anyway. I'm not gonna point out a particular one. But which one?
Yeah, I think it's like, that's why I love Japan. They revere craftsmanship and quality and history, and I mean, you've got an amazing tree. It deserves to have a pot that's just as amazing as the tree.
And the new pot has to be really amazing. And to like
Compared to an old pot, you're saying?
well, an old pot has some character and has become amazing over time, and you know it's made really well, but it's stood the test of time and now has like a story. A brand new pot has to have some other thing to be able to use in a show. Do you think?
Or some quality that says I respect history and I'm trying to imbue that into the pot as you make it. I don't know if that's.
Do you guys consider how the pots are going to age as you make it or come up with glazes or clay bodies? How they'll get,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'll know in 10 years when my pot, maybe if somebody somebody said you should bury a bunch of your pots and see what happens.
Just make a map of where you bury them, and let me know.
You should buy it and you should bury it.
Huh?
Tell them you should buy it and you should bury it.
Yeah, just no reason, I just kinda wanna know.
No, I mean, yeah, I don't know how my pots are gonna age. But
last spring I went to Gyozan's house, and he's been doing it since the 70s too. And he showed me 2 identical pots that he made in the 1970s. One sat on his shelf in his office, and the other he bought from a customer that he purchased back, you know, recently. And it was night and day. Like the clay was like black and it was gorgeous and it looked, you know, used, and this one looked like it came from IKEA. So it's like, you know, the age does matter, and it happens quicker than you think. 30 years.
Is it glazed or an unglazed pot?
What? Unglazed.
Unglazed, yeah.
Well, and so really good Chinese pots and Japanese pots, they're quite porous. People put oil in it and dust and grime gets in there, and so it absorbs all that. And I think if you're firing a cone 10 using modern clays, they're not that porous. So, you know, there's an open question about whether those will age the way.
Which brings up a really good question. People want to know, is your pot vitrified? Well, how important really is that? You know, if you're gonna let your tree sit out in the wintertime and it's gonna get snowed on and assuming that it's not, you know, coming in on itself. That was a concern for mine. I need to find a clay, that's why I have used so many clay bodies. It's looking for a clay body that's vitrified, so it's not gonna retain a lot of moisture and it's gonna survive, you know, freezing temperatures. But now says that his clay is very porous, so.
Yep. There's a science to it too. I don't wanna go into it, but
Well, but there is a science, because then the water goes in, but then it's able to work its way
Right,
out.
you can calculate all these things, but.
So you've calculated the water's escape from the fired clay?
You can calculate the ice's expansion through the membranes of the clay. So the ice has somewhere to expand to. That's what really matters.
Now has a lot of experience.
Yeah, I have a PhD in material science, so.
I know. Also trying.
So do you recommend a PhD in material science to most aspiring potters?
It hasn't hurt so far.
And it's rare to combine the artistic ability with the science.
Yeah, but you know, just again, going to Tokunama, talking with them and finding out their perspective and the way they do their clay, you learn a lot. The way they do it is night and day with the way we do it here.
Yeah.
Their approach to frost proof is very different.
And what's the biggest difference, or is there like one thing you can point to that's so different?
Well, in Tokunama they have a very special clay that's very tight and it's matures at a very low temperature.
You can't even get access, you have to be a member of.
Yeah, you have to be a
organization.
member of the Kumiai, the clay cooperative there. Actually, I had to get permission to come visit it, to see.
Even just to see it?
The secret mixing areas, yeah. There's no picture, no picture.
I'm sure you remembered it all. Though.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? So,
The differences.
Yeah, so their clay, they've been using this clay for 2,000 years in that area, and they've been using it for water jars. They're very famous for water jars, water pipes, because it's waterproof once it's fired at a low temperature. And so the way they do it is a low temperature, but for a very long time. Versus here in America, we might fire a high temperature for a very short time. So if you do that, you get less warping in the clay, and you get more water tightness, and you can do it at a lower temperature. So they end up firing some of the bonsai potters for 3 days. So it's a 3-day period on which they're firing the entire time. We can't do that, it would cost a fortune, it's crazy. So their process, so they'll fire the cone 3 or cone 4 for 3 days.
But it's heat work.
It's heat work,
Yeah.
so 3 days at cone 3 is like cone 10 in 8 hours. But we can't do that.
But structurally, it does something different.
Yeah, it
to
does
the
something
clay.
different.
Are these all on glaze?
Yeah, well, you know, everything's together in the kiln, but, yeah. So we can't reproduce the kind of magic they do there in this country without great effort.
What are the differences when you do those? What can't you reproduce that they do from that firing?
The getting the clay exactly right is going to be the challenge. I try to make my clay like theirs, but fired in a modern way.
So if you have a clay body, let's say the vitrification point of a clay quickly is higher, but you fire it longer at a lower temperature. I mean, you get less warpage.
That's right, and that's kind of the
Like
secret.
that's a challenge. So the closer you get to vitrification, the more the clay wants to move.
Right, yeah.
So that's always a constant battle. I mean, my firings used to be about 18 hours long in an electric kiln, and now I've brought it down to about 15 and a half.
In Tokunama, they have these massive kilns, absolutely massive. Like, now it's a tourist place, right? They've turned some of them into bars, so you walk in there and half of the kiln has a nice wood bar with wine bottles on it and stools, and so you sit in a long kiln and you can have a drink.
And they're firing gas?
Wood and gas.
Wood and gas.
Right.
Wood and gas.
Right, so you know, the bonsai potters there, you think of Yamaaki or Koyo, they're firing 1,000 pots at a time, you know, so to them, firing.
These are like community kilns.
It can be, yeah, but, you know, so that makes it more economical to fire for 3 days when you have 1,000 pots, which we can't do that here, you know?
Right.
Is the tokenomic clay, is it one clay or is it a blend of?
They have like 14 different clays in
Okay.
tokenomic, but most, and then each bonsai potter will place an order with the cooperative for a specific blend that they had developed. So Gyozan's clay is different than Shuho's from Yamaki's from Koyo. But in general, they all have a similar consistency. It's like a sandy.
Maybe color slight color
Yeah,
differences.
yeah. And they all claim it's secret and all that.
Got a question back here.
Yeah.
Speaking of the differences of those mixes that they put into order, I kind of have a fondness for Maruhe, and I was curious what your thoughts were on like their clay body as compared to like, let's say, Gyozan, and because they look quite different, and they have very different.
Yeah,
feel.
Maruhe's clay is probably similar to Gyozan's, except Maruhe fires an oxidation.
Okay.
That's the difference in Gyozan's reduction. Yeah.
It's funny, they're very.
Does
quite
everybody
nice.
understand the difference between oxidation and reduction?
If we didn't, could you?
Asking for a friend.
If you don't, please exit the room.
Well, reduction, and I think that, I mean, now and Byron are more qualified to speak to that. Oxidation is what you get in an electric kiln. So there's oxygen present. When you go into reduction, you're removing the oxygen, and so doesn't it pull things out of the clay body?
Pulls oxygen out of the clay.
Oxygen out of the clay, yeah.
And
So you're
and
actually
the
shutting off.
The
you're
chemicals
closing
and the
off-
clay chain, the chemicals in the clay. So, for instance, a copper in oxidation is always going to be green. You can make it go red if you fire it in reduction. That's just a simple
And so when
example.
you're firing in a reduction kiln, I feel like it just brings the clay and the glaze together more, just like visually and aesthetically. And you can fire, now you fire reduction, but your clay remains very white.
I do everything. I'll do a firing that's oxidation, and then I'll do a firing that's
Okay.
reduction. And then
So your white body is typically fired in a more
I do-
neutral or.
I do everything. It depends on the glaze, because certain glazes only come out in certain atmospheres. Yeah.
And when you reduce, what you do is you're putting more fuel in than your air intake. So you get a real carbon.
And so the temperature doesn't rise much
Yeah.
either, because there's nothing, it loses.
You start the fire. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So it's
right.
kiln control that's changing the difference
Yeah.
from oxidation reduction.
So you'll start to see flames like coming out of the kiln because it's trying to draw oxygen
It's
in
using
to
oxygen
keep the
to-
fire going.
It's very inefficient fuel wise.
Makes sense.
Yes, Tim.
I have a question. So I know there's a lot of interest within our local club, and I hear and see it all over the place with people taking up bonsai pottery. So people who are interested in doing it for their own benefit or otherwise. What kind of advice do you like to give people who are just starting out trying to do bonsai pottery? Because I know there's like a half a dozen people in our club who are making pots and doing stuff, and what would you say if they want to continue to get better as potters? What advice would you give them?
Eli.
Don't get emotionally connected to your piece, ever, because it could fail at any moment during the creation, and then you gotta let it go in the sales. So don't ever get connected to it. Make what you like. I hope it resonates with the rest of the people. That's what I say.
And you just have to make lots of pots.
Yeah,
Because
prepare
you
for heartache.
develop a relationship with the clay.
Yeah.
Like every time I change clay bodies, it's like changing, like there's my old friend, I could tell what clay I'm working with just by if I closed my eyes and started touching it.
My friends don't like me.
I think consistency is very important too. When I was working full-time at another job and I was making when I could, my pots were okay, but now that I'm in there in my studio almost every day, it comes a lot more easily and naturally. Just everything from throwing to the building to the glazing to everything else, it just comes.
Yeah, consistency.
Consistency really helps.
All right, first thing is just learning the basics of working with clay, you know?
Right.
With joining
Respect.
things and drying things and when you can do this and when you can't do this, you know? And then just lots of work on top of that, learning and developing, like any craft, just the more you do, the better you're gonna get at it.
Right.
For sure. Can't shortcut the process. You gotta
can't.
It takes time.
Right.
Unless
Put
you're
your 10,000 hours.
Right.
2 week commission.
He didn't do
Yeah,
any shortcut.
yeah. But he couldn't do that
He
early
didn't do any
on.
shortcuts, he's put a lot of time.
Yeah, what you see is, you know, a culmination of many decades or months. of-
You don't engineer a glaze overnight.
No, I'm
takes
putting test
years.
tiles in my, every firing that I do.
I'm always testing glazes.
Do you all make your own glazes? Does
I
anybody
do.
like
I
them?
do.
I do.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to buy glaze, like.
No, it comes in a little, you know.
Right.
I've written articles complaining about, what do I call it, the Betty Crockerization of pottery. Because today you can go to a pottery store and you can buy clay and you can buy glaze, and then the end result looks like everyone else's pot, right? Because it's the same glaze, the same clay. And you know, that's not the way to do it in Asia or whatever. You make it yourself, you make the clay yourself, so it looks like, what we were talking at dinner last night, right? Like, even if you knew how to do the thing, there's no way it's gonna look like Eli's, because Eli made it, and there's no way to copy Eli's glaze. And
Oh
his
yeah, you
glaze.
can definitely spot a commercial glaze.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, it's part, if you treat it, if it's an art form, you know, everything about it should be artful, like, it should not be no cutting corners.
But I really enjoy making bonsai pots because it's like it keeps me in a space that I can still be, you know, creative, but with the limitations, it's comforting to have, for me, it's comforting to have some of those limitations.
Yeah, we have to work within find our own voice within a certain set of parameters,
Yeah.
right? And
When
we're also creating art for other artists, which is a challenge. So,
When you're just an artist, there are so many directions to go, and it's hard. I struggled with finding my place, whereas now I've got my place. I make bonsai containers. It just, and then it gives me freedom within those confines.
I tell you, to me, an important thing in making bonsai pots is the people I've met through that, and then selling somebody a pot, and then years and years later coming into a show and seeing that
Yeah. Oh.
pot in a tree.
Makes it worth it.
I try to tell a lot of people, when you get your tree in that pot, send me a picture.
Yeah, I do too.
Send me it, yeah.
When you get time, find it out.
because once that pot's gone, I forget it. And I can recognize our work when I see it again, but that doesn't mean that I remember that pot. You know what I mean? It just goes out of my memory for whatever reason.
I did functional stuff for a long time, and thousands and thousands of cups and bowls and things like that, and, you know, they go away. And occasionally you'll see somebody, oh, I got one of your coffee mugs I bought 20 years ago and I still use it, or whatever. But, again, that relationship of seeing a tree in your pot and making that connection with those people that bought, it's really special.
Can I ask a question about feet? So I've been doing some hobbyist pottery for like a year and a half, and I feel like I've been improving on my glazing, I've been improving on my hand building. But one area that I have not improved on much is making anything more than like a very simple, like rectangle foot of the pot. So how do you guys make your feet and like tips on?
You're the foot queen.
It's a foot fetish. Yeah, well, I sculpt, I cloud feet, I sculpt them first, and then I
You
make
do
my
that by
own.
hand?
Yeah. And then I take an impression. I don't use plaster. I take a clay impression, and then that gets bisque fired. And then I use it as a press mold. And I still have, I have ideas of things that I wanna do and different shapes and all of that, but, you know, it's tradition. So I'm always gonna be making cloud feet. But, yeah, you know, it's just, and I'll keep making a press mold of pot. He's like, well, I need to get it smaller, so each time it's fired, then it gets a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller. I've got new feet that I just made that I haven't put on pots yet, so I'm looking forward to that. But it's time consuming, so to make some new feet, that doesn't always get done until the next round of, you know, production.
Is there a reason you stay away from plaster?
Because I feel like if I do it in plaster, I can't get that, I'm not gonna easily get that clay out of there. So if I do it with clay, then it's gonna pop out and I can reuse that mold over and over again. I know, Japanese potters, they use plaster and like pieces to put it together. So it'd probably make my life a little bit easier, but right now, that's what I'm doing.
I stole my foot from, a lot of my pots have the same foot style. I'm working on variations of that. I don't have any variations with this show, but I was trying to copy a Max Braverman foot. I couldn't do it, but it developed a foot of my own and I kept it. So that's where mine came from. And I like it to look organic, like it just evolves out of the pot, not like I add it, which I do add every one. But even on round pots, I don't carve the foot out. I add the foot to it.
Yeah, like the kind of mirror shaped pots that I had a couple of them. Those are all just hand worked into the profile of the pot, so that's not, I can't, they're added on, they're applied and sculpted. Those take a while, and those are all, the ribs are all sculpted in place, and you don't learn now. Like, well, you know, your mold shapes, you're pressing, because you can reproduce, mine are all so time consuming.
I tend to just do simple feet. I spend a lot of time on them as far as, you know, decoration. Occasionally I will, but most of mine are just, if it's, you know, round pot and thrown on the wheel, just when I'm trimming, incorporate or trim the foot into it. If I went oval or a slab built piece, just add, you know, throw a foot and cut it into sections and add it to the bottom.
That's what Ron did. I can never do that. I can never throw something that small and make it work. That always messes up.
But, I mean, you have to kind of do it, you know, 1 foot for 1 pot,
right?
The way I do it, or 1 throwing for 1 pot.
It does set your curve up, right?
Slab bit pieces, I'll use slabs to construct the foot.
Yeah, I typically cut my feet out of the slab that is the floor of my ovals, and I make mostly ovals, so that's where my feet usually come from. I've gotten better about cutting it and then rolling them all to be consistent using dowels or whatever, because a lot of times early on especially, my slabs weren't even, and so therefore my feet weren't always even, and that would cause a lot of rocking in the pots. I still get that sometimes, but I've tried to work on getting that better.
Do you sand your feet when they're not perfectly level?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Who are some, do we still have time? We good?
I think we got a few more minutes.
Who are some non-bonsai potters that inspired you guys?
Bernard Leach and the Shoji Hamada are my favorite.
Yeah.
Those two.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Warren McKenzie.
What's that?
Warren McKenzie.
I don't know that.
He was in that,
I like
the Mashiko group. He was in that group.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was the American equivalent.
Oh, the American equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Passed
When I
away.
was in school, I was inspired by Tom Coleman and Tom.
Love Tom Coleman's work. Yeah. Glenn Dare is one of mine too, an Atlanta guy. He's just got some real creative stuff that speaks to me. He's one of my first teachers.
Peter Volkus.
Yeah.
I think the Bernard Leach, Shoji Hamada's story is really interesting because at this time, this is 1900 Japan, 1900. Bernard Leach is an English potter, and he was working in England in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, and he was a prominent older potter in England, doing like folk pottery in Cornwall or wherever it was. And Shoji Hamada, a Japanese younger guy, wanted to learn pottery, but he went to England to learn pottery, as opposed to not Japan, which is crazy, right?
Yeah, totally.
But at this time, it wasn't folk pottery wasn't popular in Japan at this time. You would make teapots and stuff, but you wouldn't do art objects. So Shoji Hamada went to study with Bernard Leach in England. And so he learned all these English techniques for making pottery, a Japanese guy. And so he came back to Japan and made all these beautiful Japanese forms, but with English slip trailing, English glazes. And Bernard Leach ended up going to Japan with them, and they collaborated on a bunch of really interesting, East plus West pieces.
Then they came to America, and they took ceramics into an art form as opposed to just a functional form.
Yeah.
And that's where the Mashiko thing came in, and Warren was a big part of that.
Yeah. So I went to Mashiko, and I went to Shoji Hamada's house last year just to see, to feel that experience. Pretty fun to go full circle on that. Yeah. Inspirational.
I'll get to do that at all of y'all's studios one day. Just to get the feel. Just to get the feel.
So, have you guys had any new developments in your work or your practice? Things that you said you were working on some new feet forms?
My newest venture is to do some relief sculpture on the sides of pots. And I'm pretty excited about that. And we'll see where it goes, but I've got a desire to maybe try to get into Gafu-ten either this year or next year. That's kind of a personal goal.
With some relief carving?
Maybe, we'll see.
There's been so much international interest in the Gafu-ten. I was talking to Daisaku Nomoto, who runs the thing, and he said they're going to make a Western category in the Gafu-ten. So there'll be like general and then a Western category. So maybe you'll be the first winner of the Western category.
Well, it's exciting to even just get geared up for that. So we'll see what happens.
Is this your first foray into relief carving? Have you tried that on any other media?
I've done a lot of different things, sculpture. I've always been more of a 3D person, so I've done some animal sculptures and things like that. So it just seemed to be a natural progression to want to put something on the side of a pot. So I've got I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, is it ume or mume? Branch that's going across a pot with some apricot flowers. So we'll see. I'm holding on to it because I don't know what glaze to put on it yet. I still have some testing that I have to do. I don't want to ruin it. I've got a bunch. That was one of the pots that I spent a couple
Eli
of days
said not to
on
get
it.
connected to your stuff though.
Oh, yeah, well, this pot's too connected.
Right.
Too much time. I did it in the middle of getting ready for this show, so I'm not gonna ruin it.
So are you sprigging or carving?
I didn't, well, I sprigged in the sense that I took a canvas and I started building this little, branch on it and then lifted it off and put it on the side of the pot. So yeah, it's kind of sort of a sprig, I guess. And if I do more, I will do some kind of a casting of it so that I can maybe replicate it, but it's still gonna have handwork on it. I wanna stay as far away from like production stuff as I can. I mean, even the first window pot that I did, it took a long time.
We had a couple of ties for second place, but coming out
Does
on
that mean
top
we're
was Jason 21, Stuart Thiessen with the
I don't know how long this is supposed to be.
Tokugawa Juniper. Stuart Thiessen,
Any
give
new
us a round of
developments?
applause, everybody.
New glazes, that's it. Just constantly making new glazes.
How small of a batch do you mix when you're testing something that's just new?
It's always 100 grams, but I've done thousands of these 100-gram batches.
What do you do Do you hang on to your?
Yeah, I've got a whole cabinet just filled with thousands of textiles in different
But I mean
bins.
the actual glaze, like once you.
Oh, you
pass
just throw it out.
Okay.
I've never made a textile. Every pot I've ever made is a textile. Wow.
I
Wow.
was,
Yeah.
And throwing it all to the wind.
That's right. See what sticks.
It was all on purpose, right?
Yeah.
The foot I'm working on is I work with it's sort of the same foot that I have, but I add a pointed tip to it so it becomes an arrow. The other end of it will still be the flare out, so it looks like the feathers of an arrow. And this thing I have for my life is I always want to move forward. If I have that arrow, it's that forward motion continues. Another thing I'm working on, I got a couple on my table out there, is where I throw a wall like I'm making an oval, but I leave it round. And I square the bottom off. Byron does some squaring off too, but I try to keep my top as round as I can and square the bottom. So you have this push and pull dynamic between a square pot and a round pot. And it can work on low levels for whatever you're doing.
that's really interesting. Anything in development for you, Byron?
Not really. I've been thinking of some things lately that I want to do different. Not even know that I can verbalize on them, but I'd like to do maybe some things with more decorative feet, but trying to figure out how to incorporate that into what I do. And then I've been kind of experimenting. I've done some classes with some clubs and things where you kind of make your own pot thing, and I've done some extrusion techniques there. And so I did a few pieces before this show. Unfortunately, sold in Houston last week. But where I was intentionally kind of bowling those slab pieces, want to move and bow a lot when you fire them. So I was intentionally kind of blowing them out, and those turned out pretty nice. So I'm kind of explore that a little bit as a process.
My fun thing to do is I'll take scraps of clay and just put them together, and that's where a lot of my kusamono pots have come from. And for me, my kusamono pots, it's the lighthearted part of what I do. I have a lot of fun, and I can make them faster too. So it's rewarding from that standpoint. And I feel a little bit more like now when I make kusamono pots. I want more of them.
Oh.
Do you feel like you should have more freedom to do?
More freedom, it's not as serious, it's
Yeah.
much more lighthearted. And I've made a whole bunch of stamps, so I put my own stamps on the surfaces. And, yeah, it's just fun and lighthearted. And Young loves my pot, so that's good.
I have yet to find out what she thinks of mine.
I feel like I've thrown myself way out there to make big pots, and I can do it. I figured I can do it. Now I need to pull myself back in for refinement just a little bit and really get big pots and get them just as
You have to do it.
How do you keep the floor of your pot from sinking as it dries? Do you put sponges underneath?
I put little lumps of clay.
You do that, okay.
A piece of newspaper between it so it doesn't stick, and just keeps it.
And then when you're firing, you use bulb.
Yeah, they're
Because
for
with
both the
firing,
firings.
if you're approaching vitrification, your pots always are gonna have to sag, so I have to use little supports.
Okay. I tried putting some under the largest pot that I attempted, of course, it's in a reclaimed bin now. But I put the little studs on my work table and I set the thing onto it, and the studs were much too tall. So I put a little dent into the floor of the pot.
Across that foot and make sure it's only a little bit above it. Then you take a wear board and put it down. Just put a little dab of water on top of each one. I put a wear board down and then pick it up so they're stuck to it. You take them off of that so they're nice and flat on both sides and put them down again.
And then when it's bone dry, you could transport a giant bone dry clay and try to get in your kiln.
Right?
Or if you're making the foot out of slab, you just have a little extra. Cut that and pick out the salt the same time. Or if you're throwing it, you have a little extra, so you cut that and add that around to support it.
I'm told that I've got to ask you guys a last question. You guys all seem pretty wise and cool. So it's not really bonsai related, but that's a cool band. So you were cool in that. So, just your professionals, you're following the thing that you love to do. Any advice in doing that for those of us who are still searching for, a way to dive into it, or, a way to give it all up and try it, or just keep doing the little things, or I don't know, any life advice as creative professionals?
Look a lot, pay attention.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to copy.
Yeah, because it's gonna turn out your way anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just pay attention to detail.
Just keep showing up.
And try to be a good craftsman. I've seen so many people that just throw clay together, and I think, you could just take it, be cleaner, be a little bit more careful. But you just have to keep making too. You just have to do it a lot.
With, like bonsai, how do you learn the quickest way of learning? How do you learn?
Yeah.
Find somebody that you can work with or will work with you. That's the best way. I mean, if you can find the teacher or teach you the basics, whether it's a workshop or a class or apprenticeship or whatever.
Any of you guys do that? Apprentices or workshops?
I do workshops in my place.
You do?
Yeah.
I've done a few workshops. I don't have never taken on an apprentice.
But later this month, I'm doing a workshop for a BSOP for 60 people. Actually, we're flying a potter in from Tokunama. So we're all doing a workshop.
Can I come take that?
You can, yeah. We're gonna make pots all week.
Wow. For how many people?
Oh, we have 4 classes with 15 each, and they're all filled up, so.
That's amazing.
Like an extra.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'll say lastly, always go forward, never straight.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Just keep moving
I
forward,
like
but
that.
don't ever straighten out. Just keep the wildness about you, but always move forward. Yeah. Forward motion.
That's what Shimpo means. Did you know that?
No.
The
It means what?
To progress forward.
I didn't know that.
Shimpo. Really?
Yeah.
Funny how their banding wheels never stop. They never go.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
really awesome. Thanks for your time. Thanks for bringing your expertise and your.
Yeah, it's a nice opportunity to get to sit down with
Yeah.
Absolutely.
fellow potters.
It's always, you learn stuff
Yeah.
from each other.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for sharing.
It was good.
Yeah,